Good morning, and thanks for joining us. Oh, good morning, sorry. And thanks for joining us for the Microsoft Security Tech Talk on 3 key ways to protect your cloud and hybrid environment. My name is Grace, and I am the Microsoft Security Research Analyst here at Softworks. I'll first cover some housekeeping as we kick off. If you have not got a coffee, you've still got a couple minutes to go grab one now while we wait for the last couple of people to join us. Please note that the webinar is recorded and you'll receive a copy of the webinar afterwards if you'd like to go back and refer to it. And finally, there's a chance to ask questions in the Q&A panel at any point, and those will be addressed at the end. We'll also like to share a quick 1-minute survey at the end, so please fill that out. That does help us improve our tech talks in the future. Okay, so now that everyone has joined the event, we're ready to get started. Thanks again for joining us, and today's Tech Talk is presented by Microsoft Solutions architect Matt Smith, who will be talking about key ways to protect the cloud and hybrid environments. Microsoft Security Tech Talks are designed to keep your organization on top of the latest Microsoft security stack. These webinars are free technical workshops, self-structured, and include some slides. The Microsoft Security Tech Talks happen on the third Tuesday of every month, which is why we call them Tech Talk Tuesdays. They cover many hot security topics so far, including Defender for Microsoft 365, Microsoft Sentinel, Cloud App Security, Zero Trust, and Privileged Access Management. You can catch up on all of our previous Tech Talks on our website. Now I'm excited to introduce our presenter, Matt Smith, who has been at Softworks since 2010. And when he's not designing the next level of advanced Microsoft security infrastructure, Matt loves to go touring in classic BMWs across Europe. These trips have taken him across the Alps many times, the Lake District, Peak District, Austria, Switzerland, Italy, Greece, as well as the Scotland's North Coast 500. At this point, you're tired of hearing me talk, so I'll hand over now to Matt to take you through today's main presentation.
Thanks, Grace, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us here today. So as Grace said, today we're going to look at protecting cloud workloads. So for us, this all falls under the banner of Microsoft Defender for Cloud. I'm going to do most of this session in the Azure portal, so you'll see some practical steps that you can apply to your own environments. As we go along, I'll give you an insight into the features and functions. That's the security posture management and the workload protection platform. And we'll look at how we approach onboarding and using these. So let's get the basics out of the way. As I alluded to, Defender for Cloud comprises of two main functions. The first one is cloud security posture management, This is to assess your resources, to identify weaknesses that you need to address. The second is the workload protection platform. This provides the sort of real-time element so you can react quickly to prevent any situation from escalating. So to deliver these features, Defender for Cloud runs a kind of continual assessment process, much like SecureScore, but this time the assessment is against firewalls, networks, storage, and applications in the cloud. The Defender for Cloud also follows the same logic as Defender for Endpoint, where it provides you with the recommendations and what to do to better protect those resources. The protection piece in the workload protection platform is specific to each workload, and it gets its own Defender for variant. For example, we have Defender for Key Vault. That will be looking for unusual attempts to access Vault accounts, whereas you might have something like Defender for Storage, which will be watching operations like get blob, put blob, create file, list files, etc. And it's using that information to look for anomalies specific to that type of resource. A big one as well is the Defender for servers. This actually leverages Defender for Endpoint, so it follows the same kind of Plan 1 and Plan 2 subscription model that service uses. That gives you a full kind of endpoint detection and response capability, including things like attack surface reduction and the antivirus engine. Now we deploy the Defender for Servers feature against any Windows or Linux machine that lives in Azure or AWS or Google Cloud, or for that matter, on-premise servers. And that's ultimately what we mean by a kind of multi-cloud environment. So I kind of given you a bit of positioning there about what the product is and kind of the background to it. But I think it's always good, like we do on all of these talks, to dive into the system and kind of see what it actually looks like. So let's see if the live demo god's going to be on our side today, and I'll jump straight into the portal and let's start looking at what this actually is, how it works, and what we do with it. So you'll find Defender for Cloud in the main Azure portal, portal.azure.com. It'll be on the main menu of any environment that you go to, or you can search for Defender for Cloud in the main navigation bar at the top. When you land in the service itself, you'll initially see a dashboard like you do with most of these systems. And what that's going to do is show you a kind of overview at a very high level as to what's connected and kind of where you are on the journey of securing the environment, and whether or not you've got any particular kind of issues or things to deal with. I'll take you through this very quickly on here. So security posture, this is kind of like SecureScore, the continual assessment piece. And we get a breakdown on the dashboard of the different environments that we've got connected. I mentioned at the start there, we cover Azure, Google Cloud and AWS with connectors, and we'll look a bit more about how you connect those up and what comes through from there and what it looks like. We have regulatory compliance. Again, we'll drop into what that means, but it gives us scores against standards that we want to assess our environment against. That'll help us build the company's kind of overall security posture with a steer towards achieving those particular accreditations. We get to see very quickly as well where we're missing things, where we've got gaps in our protection. So where we haven't got services deployed, where there's bits that are missing, for any of our resources that we've got connected. And that basically boils down to, in the workload protections, the kind of platform as a service resources that haven't onboarded, and as an inventory we can look at specific kind of virtual machines where agents or services might be missing, where we're not getting a full picture. All of these things are clickable and will take us through into particular submenus. So I'm going to start by just looking at the security posture piece, because we'll come back towards the end and look at how did we bring how do we connect these services to it for this information to be presented to us. So what the security posture area is essentially secure score for those particular resources. So it's running that continual assessment against any of the environments that are connected. So on this main screen, we've got a quick consolidated view of where we are, a total score for each Azure subscription, each Google Cloud environment, each AWS environment that we've connected up. So a total score for the whole organization, and then how that breaks down across the particular environments. I'll actually use this now just to give you a kind of quick insight into something that you might want to use yourselves. If I filter that, so if I want to see very quickly what the total score is across a particular environment, I can filter out AWS and Azure just to see the Google Cloud Platform service and see how many resources have kind of missing connections or what we class as unhealthy, and how many recommendations there are that we need to have a look at and review around those resources. If I dive into one of these very quickly, I've got this little cloud demo project set up on here. When we look at security posture, we always break that down into individual actionable items that we can undertake against each system or each service. I'll come back to these recommendations a bit more in just a moment. But what I wanted to show you here is directly from that dashboard screen, you can drop straight down into the recommendations that are against that particular environment. And we can also then have a look and see if we've got things that can have what's called a quick fix applied to them. So again, we'll look at this in a bit more detail, but a quick fix is always highlighted on the menu here with this little lightning bolt in the insights area. And what that essentially means is there's a way that you can use the automation features from Azure, whether it's AWS, Google Cloud, or in the Azure subscription itself, to apply the remediation that this is recommending without actually having to go and do anything, or without having to go and look it up or to work out how to implement that particular change. Some of these might have a manual step to them, some of them might be completely automated, and I say we'll have a look and we'll probably come back to that particular one as we go along. So going back to the main menu screen here, the security posture is our secure score. Tells us kind of what's going on across the environment at a very high level. Driving that secure score are all the resources that are connected to our system. To see all those resources that we have, we can come into the inventory section. It's kind of a single place to see everything that's connected to the particular or to this environment. If I pick up on a particular resource, let's have a look here. We've got some virtual machines. If I drop into that, in a similar way to how the secure score area, the posture, was showing us an overview of the environment, in the inventory, we can see specific actionable recommendations for each particular resource that we've got attached to us. So what I've got here is what we call an ARC machine that's connected. I'll come back to that and explain what that is in a bit more detail, but essentially it's a server that's connected to our environment, and the assessment process has used the agent that we deployed to that resource to look through the way it's configured, what's deployed on it, what applications, if it's a VM, we can see the applications that are in it, or the services that are installed. If it's things like a storage account, it'll be the way that that's been configured from a security point of view. But we can look at that and pull out these actionable recommendations. So I can see in here from virtual machine number 1, that's connected through the Arc service, that the log analytics agent is in an unhealthy state. By clicking through to that recommendation, I can get some details of the manual steps that I could go through. But where as I said before, on that insights indicator, there is a quick fix available for this particular action. So if I go into here and hit fix, because this is an Azure connected resource that's under the control of an Azure agent, this is a fully automated process where I can say I want to deploy or configure that log analytics agent on this Linux based Arc machine. I'll tell it the workspace that I want to send that log feed to, and I can simply hit fix resource, and off that will go in the background, queue up the scripts and the process that's needed against that that system. Now, obviously, the system had to be onboarded somehow to begin with, and I'll give you a little bit of an insight into to how we achieve that. So that's just a very quick kind of insight into how we can use the inventory piece to look at one particular resource at a time. Not necessarily the most efficient way to go about understanding kind of what's wrong in an environment, because you might have thousands of resources connected. So a much more efficient way to go about this is to use the recommendations area of the service. Now, in our recommendations, if I expand that to cover all environments that we have connected, this is where we find all the different risks that we need to address. These different risks are grouped by the different types of control that needs to be applied. So in terms of how you approach this, it's often useful to create small projects based on the control type that you're going to implement, because there'll be a lot of common factors there, especially when you're going through change control process, where you'll need to speak to the same teams, same people, or at the very least they'll have a similar impact for each of these things that we're required to do against here. So again, if I go down here into auditing and logging on here, I can see in here that we've got, again, another quick fix actionable item in here, and I can see that 15 of the 25 logic apps that are covered by this particular subscription haven't got a diagnostics feed directly into the log workspace that Defender for Cloud is running from. So what I can do from here in that kind of grouped effort event is come into here and see all the resources in one place. And if I was then going to apply that change to all of these, I can, or a set of them, I can select the ones that I want to apply the update to. I've got that quick fix capability, so I can come into here, set the profile name if any of you have configured the diagnostics logs against resources in Azure, set the name that you're going to put onto that diagnostics connector, select the workspace that you're going to add it to. Depending on what you're configuring here, you'll get other choices, hit fix, and again, the platform will go off and create that kind of scripted process to go and apply that control to each of those services or each of those resources. So if we look at this kind of order of how this is laid out, a bit like the secure score service, it's always ordered with the highest score or the largest risk, if you like, to the top. So it's quite safe to kind of use those and work your way down that list, because you'll achieve the most for your organization's security posture in the quickest way possible. If I look at another one in here around encrypting data in transit, I can see on here that I've got a few completed ones, a couple that are outstanding. So I'm not just assessing virtual machines here. Here I've got a control around securing transfer in and out of storage against a storage account. and I've got a web application there that is not enforcing secure FTP or FTP secure sessions. But if I look at the storage account one quickly on there, it appears I don't have permission to apply that, but never mind. So if I look at that, it will tell me again which of the resources doesn't have that control in place. This is why it doesn't fully automate this exercise, because there will be some kind of human interaction checks that you need to do around that. So what this is telling me here is that in order to achieve the kind of maximum score for this, in the storage account, I'd need to enable secure transfer. So basically HTTPS against the access to the URLs for those containers or those blobs that are published publicly. Now, I know from the setup of this system that that's being used as a certificate revocation list, and CRLs typically need to be exposed on HTTP, not HTTPS. So in this particular instance, that wouldn't be a valid configuration change to make. So what we do is place an exemption in there. Now, it's not recommended to have an exemption for excluding HTTPS, but there might be a scenario like that where you need to. So you'll decide whether you've mitigated that through some other kind of process or control, or you accept the risk. So it can't be HTTPS. And then by publishing that as an exemption, the system will disregard that particular check against that particular resource instance, again bringing your kind of secure score up. In the same way as any of you have used the Defender for Endpoint service, these are all on a kind of daily rotation typically for rechecks. So just give it some time if you're going through making these kind of exemptions or processing the change against the system. The changes typically happen straight away because you've made them. However, the process to actually report that back to you is going to be slightly delayed because this is all running from policies in Azure, and policies are always on a timed basis. Let's look at how else we can use this recommendations area in here. So we have the ability in here to kind of filter, and a really useful little tip for you is to use the tactics filters in here. Think about this along the lines of your MITRE attack framework. So what's going to be the biggest risks, or what would you put first? It's generally that kind of initial access type threat, because that's right up there on somebody's got to get in first. That's usually the first step, or one of the very early sort of discovery stages, or at least straight after discovery, you've got that initial access. So by filtering out that, you can kind of triage or thin out the list of work activities for the team, and again gain the most kind of benefit from the system as quickly as possible for your organization, without being faced with a kind of huge number of remediation actions that you need to take, because it can be quite daunting to understand where to begin when you first come into here. So if you wanted to take an approach of just having a look to see what are all the actionable items I've got where the system can fix it for me, where is there a quick fix through the service, instead of using that grouped view in here, we can come into an all recommendations screen here, and you'll see that little lightning bolt against each remediation action that gives you that kind of automated process rather than something that you have to manually go and do. Now, I alluded earlier that there's sometimes a kind of halfway house there, and that depends on the cloud platform that the service is attached to. Most things with a quick fix capability that live in Azure can be applied directly through automation from the Azure platform. So you just choose the options, hit submit, will go off in the background, generate the script or the ARM template, and it will apply it to that resource. If I look at this one here, so this particular recommendation is a Google Cloud Platform VM instance should be connected to Azure Arc. So this is probably a good point to kind of segue into how are other cloud environments connected to Defender for Cloud, and kind of what does that look like. So in terms of what does it look like when you're processing recommendations and it's identifying what's wrong or where you've got gaps in your security, it looks exactly like any other resource. So whether it's in Azure or it's in Google Cloud or it's in AWS, you will see the resources detailed out. Most of them have slightly different icons and different descriptions because they don't match exactly to the resource types that are in Azure. But it presents it all to you in the same way. And the important piece there is for your security teams, it's always a consistent and common process to go through to understand what's wrong, where do I need to address it, and what needs to be done. And if there's a kind of recommendation for how to do it, again, it's always broken down into steps of what you need to do in exactly the same way that SecureScore or Defender for Endpoint would do if you're using those particular services. Now, I'm going to come back to this piece and just show you how it works. But first, I'm just going to show you how the environment gets connected. So when we're talking about what we connect to the Defender for Cloud service, we are essentially talking about one of three environments: Azure subscriptions, AWS accounts, and Google Cloud projects. So let's start with the really simple one of the Azure subscriptions. So connecting resources to Defender for Cloud, you can put settings specifically to different resources by grouping them together under a log workspace, because you can apply the controls to the workspace, but it's always recommended to apply those at the subscription level. So if you go into Defender for Cloud right now and you haven't got any services onboarded, it will take you through into the environment settings here, and it will show you the subscriptions where you have the option to enable it. Now I'm in a slightly limited account here, but you'll have, as an owner of the subscription, two main buttons at the top here. Basically, the basic service comes with it, free, the kind of off version, if you like, and then to enable the Defender for Cloud plan. Once you enable the Defender for Cloud plan against the subscription, you're then going to switch on each of those different resource types that you want the service to monitor and manage, or to kind of observe. So they each have slightly different pricing models or different ways that they work. You'll see the logic here as we go along. If we're talking about the Defender for Servers feature in Defender for Cloud, then that directly mimics Defender Endpoint Plan 1 and Plan 2 service. It does have some additional capabilities in here, so it will give you that per device kind of estimated monthly fee against it. So Defender for Servers Plan 1, kind of similar fee to what you would get if you were just licensing a Defender Endpoint server license as an individual device. The difference here is this is all consumption licensing. So while the servers are off, you're not paying for it. And servers are on, obviously you are paying for that service because they're there when they're assessed. So it does have a different price model. These are what the monthly fees would be if the systems are on continuously against it. If I switch that there to Plan 1, you'll see which of those particular features drop off. So obviously Defender Plan 2 is recommended. But so you're aware, if you're just looking for that kind of malware detection and the basic kind of vulnerability management of it, giving you that secure score piece and running the antivirus and the endpoint detection and response capabilities, Plan 1 licenses are more than sufficient for doing those bits. In this particular subscription, this is connected to Sentinel. So using the Plan 2 license in here has a cumulative effect on the cost of storage for Sentinel. So there's lots of bits there that you can look at around how costs go. I'm not going to go any further than that around Defender for Endpoint, because there is a lot of work there to calculate exactly what that costs. But just to highlight that you basically pick which plan that you want, and that's then enabled against all servers under that particular subscription. As I say, if you want to target in different servers with different license types for some reason, then you would do that by targeting the plan against the workspace that the resource is connected to. The app service has a standard fee, so any Azure app service has the same pricing model against it. There's different types of Azure databases, and again, they have their own license type against them. Some of these systems here will give you a settings option on here for what level of information you want to bring in and whether or not you're automatically going to configure it to capture all the kind of log analytics agent data into the workspace. So you work your way down through these settings, but essentially you're turning on and off the services that you want to include in the workspace. The more data that we have in the workspace, the more we can assess. Therefore, the broader assessment we can make across your entire environment, giving you a much more accurate score and a much more accurate report of where there might be gaps in your posture. Now, once we've decided what's going to be turned on and off, we then have these extensions that we apply. Now, extensions are kind of the means by which we perform that particular assessment. So by turning on the log analytics agent or the Azure monitor agent, they're all one in the same thing. That will ensure that all the log data comes to us. And essentially, if you don't turn that bit on, all you're getting is the Defender endpoint protection piece. You're not going to get any of the analytics capability because there's no data there for it to analyze. The vulnerability assessment bit is what's driving those posture engines. So you generally always want that service to be turned on, and you have a choice there for the Microsoft version or the Qualys scanner. The guest configuration agent, that's kind of diving right down into the machine. So if you take a Windows machine, for example, that will be pulling out all the possible registry level controls, a bit like a kind of assessment of group policy or Intune policy, if you're using those. So it's kind of much deeper dive into the machine itself, and that's against a kind of baseline policy set that Microsoft provide. It also is used in the regulatory compliance checks, so I'll come to those in just a moment. And then we have our configuration for how we onboard the various different components of Kubernetes or the containers service. So by switching those on, that's effectively it. Defender for Cloud is up and running. You have visibility. It will start building a picture. The policies will start running. So it's really simple when it comes to an Azure environment. These security policies, this is where our regulatory compliance assessments are made. So in here we have a set of predefined initiatives, as they're called. You can create your own as well, but just out of the box, you've got a broad range of different standards that you can apply just by hitting add. And because the system is collating all of that inventory data and all of that log data, it can assess whether or not you're meeting the required controls for these particular standards. And I'll show you in just a second how we review where we are on one of those baselines. So Azure environments, really simple, tick a load of boxes, on or off, choose the services that you want to connect. When it comes to connecting AWS or Google Cloud, it's wizard driven. So we add an environment to the system. So it's either Amazon or Google. I've got Google set up here, so I'll take you through it. Process is relatively similar for each environment. What we do is we first define the kind of connection to it. We're going to need our organization ID from the cloud provider's platform. We're going to decide which resources we want to monitor. So this is a bit like turning those on-off switches in the Azure subscriptions. But again, it's specific to the Google Cloud piece. Some of these have costs because we're going to run resources on the Google side as well as on the Microsoft side, but that's explained as you go through these, and you can look that information up on Microsoft reference docs. Now, actually connecting the Google Cloud environment is essentially a large script here that's provided for us. And then in our Google environment, we would simply paste that into a Cloud Shell against that Google account. Obviously, the user that's signed in needs the relevant permissions to be able to do that. And that will then run through a series of steps to create a project, some resources in it, some security groups, the user accounts, the IAM access rights that are needed in order to reach into the Google Cloud environment and extract details of all the information that's there. In the Google Cloud model, when you get to the end of that process that runs, it essentially will provide you with the project number that you need to place into here, and then that's pretty much all that you'd need to do to define the service. You'd hit review and create on the basis that that script has completed successfully on the Google Cloud side. The Azure platform and Defender for Cloud will then reach out to retrieve that level of information. And that's how we connect up a particular resource and particular service. Now, if I go back to that recommendation that I showed you earlier, again from the Google Cloud piece here, and we had an action against one of these resources in here to connect. Let's see if we've got them on here, to connect that VM instance to Azure Arc. So I said before, there's kind of automated fixes, and in the Azure platform that can be completely seamless. Some of them across the Google platform and across the AWS platform are seamless in that the instruction can be sent direct. Some are not though, because they require a level of permission, a level of access. So if I take this one, for example, that VM needs to be connected through the Arc instance. I've got my system set up in Europe, so it's already predefined those. I've selected my resource there that I want to bring across. I know that's a Linux VM. I need to tell it that. And then that will give me a script here that I can use. So if I open that up for us, and then it's again all pre-formatted for use directly on the Google Cloud platform. So I can paste that in there, and it should run the command for us. Although in there I've not uploaded the script yet to their service. Sorry, I thought I'd done that earlier. So I would have uploaded the script, and then I could run that against there, and that will automatically onboard that particular machine directly into the Azure Arc environment. Now, while we're talking a little bit about Azure Arc, I just want to give you a little tiny insight into what that is and why it's important when it comes to Defender for Cloud. So for those of you that haven't seen or don't have any exposure yet to Azure Arc is your method of connecting external resources directly to the Azure environment for the purpose of management. It's a whole topic in its own right, so I won't go too much further than to say that. But the process to go through, if you've got on-premise machines and in the context of Defender for Cloud, we're talking about hybrid devices here. Is if you want to bring VMs in as a hybrid device, so you want to license all the capability of the Defender for Cloud service, get all the benefits of the Defender Cloud piece, and have one standard way to look at all your resources and servers through one environment and one dashboard, you'd simply come into Azure Arc and onboard the servers through here. Now, directly onboarding these servers doesn't initially incur any costs at all. It's purely just a way to establish a link. Once you then start processing things like adding the Defender for Cloud service to the Azure Arc system, then you'll obviously start to pay the fees for those. But adding these systems on here is, again, a simple case of generating a script for the resource. So in here, I'll tell it where do I want to place that particular VM and which OS is that running. And at the moment, we have coverage for Windows and Linux, which pretty much covers everything that we would want to. And then depending on how I've got connection to Azure, I might have VPN connection set up, or a express route using a private endpoint, or the machines might need to go via a proxy to get connection out, or they might just go directly over the web. And then in a similar way to what we were presented there from Google Cloud, we get in this case, PowerShell script that we can download, take that PowerShell script to the Windows server and execute that, and it will onboard the VM into Azure Arc. And then by having that set of resources included under the subscription that we've got in here, they will then be flagged for onboarding into Defender Endpoint. And that's how simple it is to join up any resources in that kind of hybrid model. Okay, so I'm going to finish this kind of part of the presentation just on how that regulatory compliance piece works, and just a very quick snippet of what the workload protections piece is. So regulatory compliance, when we were looking there at onboarding and how you connect resources, you specify which security policies that you want to be assessed. When they've been assessed, they will show up here in regulatory compliance. So I can have a look and say, okay, if I'm trying to achieve ISO 27001, of the accessible components that I've got, so it's not going to take me through every step of area of that ISO standard if I don't have resources that it would apply to, or I'm not doing something in Azure that section would apply to, then it doesn't show it for me. But in here, for example, we have a control around segregation of duties. So something that we can tangibly achieve in Azure to show that we are undertaking that is to have a maximum of 3 owners dedicated or designated, to that subscription. If we come into here, we can see that those 2 subscriptions have more than 3 owners. Therefore, that's not good practice under ISO standards. So the recommendation is for you to assess that and decide who the owners should be and remove some of those. So a bit like Secure Score, it's giving you steps, practical things that you can do with recommendations, but this time it's grouped by the particular compliance assessment that you want it to want to assess your environment for. The final piece in here is the workload protection. So I mentioned right at the beginning, this is all about the kind of real-time alerting, the Defender for servers element, if you like, but it's not just Defender for servers. It is also covering other areas like the storage accounts and the app services. An interesting one that you'll find in here that I'll highlight very quickly is the adaptive network hardening piece. So you get a quick view on this dashboard of what's not connected, where have I got holes or problems. So I've got an app control there that's unprotected. But I've also got this recommendation here around adaptive network hardening. So I can see very quickly that these three resources have some sort of network recommendation around them. If I take that first one there, the system has identified that I am accepting these inbound ports. So I'm accepting 53, 161, 162, 514, which I think is syslog port, to this particular system. And it's asking me, is that correct? Should you be doing that? It's not normal. Why are you doing that? Now, I know that this is a management system for a set of firewalls, so it will be receiving syslog information in. But if I decided that there's no reason why inbound DNS should be allowed against that particular machine, I can enforce a control on there, and that will go off into the appropriate network security group for that particular VM, and it will block the inbound attempts on port 53 to that particular virtual machine. So quick ways where you can harden your network controls by using that assessment service. Okay, I'm very much conscious of time, so thank you all very much for participating in this particular presentation. As a kind of takeaway for you, the main things that I really wanted to get across here are that the Defender for Cloud service is more than just a protection piece for Microsoft Azure. If you are going to go and do some research or understand anything else around this, have a look into Azure Arc if you haven't already. Start simple with it, look at it from an on-premise server point of view. It's going to become more and more important in the security model around Microsoft as a means to onboard non-Azure and non-cloud-based systems into that whole Defender environment. And those of you who've done any work with Sentinel or that SIEM service there, you'll know that we're moving away from the what we call the OMS agent into the Azure management agent. That's all part of the Arc model. So well worth learning that or understanding it a bit more. Hopefully you got the point there around the subscriptions piece and the method for deployment. It's a series of switches on and off, and it's consumption based. So if you have a go, try it, don't like it, cost too much, whatever, you can turn it off quickly. You're not making long-term commitments to use the service. So easy to deploy, especially across the Azure environment, and not particularly complicated to deploy against things like AWS or Google Cloud. And like I said there, it's all consumption based. So your risk in terms of spend and cost is minimal, because turn it on, turn it off. If you're using it, you're paying. If you turn it off, you're not making long-term commitments for it. Okay, so to wrap the presentation up, we'll do a few kind of questions. We'll have a look through there. Before I jump onto those, if you just take a minute to have a look at our survey, just to fill that out for us. It is really helpful for us to know what are interesting topics and what we should be looking at next. I apologise there, I should have removed that line from the slide. August has already gone. The next Tech Talk will be in October, and we'll be publishing that fairly shortly. You can always watch again on any of the other Tech Talks that we've done this year or in previous years. They're all available at softworks.com/techtalks. Okay, let's have a look and see what we've got question wise, if anybody's got any comments or anything for us to have a look at there. No, okay. I'm not seeing any come in. Normally we get a few during the presentation, so hopefully that was useful for you all. If you do have questions you want to ask separately, you can reach out to info@softworks.com. One of the guys there will come straight to me if you want to set up a call or a meeting or something to have a chat through. We can absolutely do that. And yeah, I'll just leave you by saying, please, you'll find the links to the question form for our feedback in the Q&A panel of Teams here. I'll leave the session open momentarily for you to find that and fill it in for us. Thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.